Welcome to The Debate. The story of enterprise adoption of generative AI it seems to have settled into this persistent state of, let's call it cognitive dissonance. On one hand, we have these repeated, large-scale studies showing really enthusiastic, widespread corporate usage, clear budget commitments, and importantly, reported positive financial returns. But then on the other hand, we have these really stark reports suggesting that almost none of that massive investment is actually translating into the structural bottom line P&L change that frankly was promised.
Right.
So the central question before us is this: how do we rigorously reconcile the really positive outlook and reported ROI among senior enterprise leaders, what we can perhaps call the accountable acceleration narrative from studies like Wharton-GBK, with the, frankly, startling conclusion from other experts, like those at MIT NANDA, that 95% of organizations are seeing zero measurable P&L return? I'll be representing the view that GenAI has definitively entered a phase of financially accountable implementation, moving beyond just pilot curiosity.
And I'll argue that this widespread narrative of rapid scaled success is, well, largely misleading. I think it's masked by what we really have to view as a profound Gen AI divide. While general tools see high adoption, and yeah, that is what your cited studies often measure, they seem to be failing to provide the structural transformation needed at scale. This leaves, the vast majority of enterprise investment dollars just sitting idle, returning basically nothing to the bottom line.
Well, the evidence for acceleration, drawn from, I think, quite robust cross-sectional studies like that Wharton-GBK research, suggests mainstream integration is really well underway. And this isn't just theory, it's actual behavioral data. Daily GenAI usage by senior decision makers in large U.S. enterprises has surged by a remarkable 17 percentage points just year over year. It's hit 46%. Now, when nearly half of leadership is using a technology daily, that signifies, to me at least, integration into core management and decision-making workflows, not merely experimentation.
Okay.
And crucially, the lens has shifted to accountability. 3/4 of these leaders, that's 72%, report actively tracking formal ROI metrics. They're focusing on productivity gains, yes, but also incremental profit. And the results reported are positive. 74% already see positive returns on their Gen AI investments. This conviction, it leads to real-world financial consequences. 88% anticipate budget increases in the next 12 months, and budgets are strategically pivoting toward internal R&D, now comprising about 30% of tech budgets, which shows firms are deeply committed to building custom, defensible solutions.
I see why you find those numbers compelling. I mean, when 3 out of 4 leaders report positive returns, the sentiment is clearly optimistic. However, let me give you a rather different perspective, one drawn from the reality of deployment failure that seems revealed in the MIT NANDA research. Despite all the excitement and the estimated, $30 to $40 billion funneled into enterprise Gen AI, our analysis reveals a, frankly, shocking reality. 95% of organizations are getting zero return, zero measurable P&L impact.
95% is a huge number.
Is. And the failure point, I contend, is this pilot to production chasm. While generic tools like ChatGPT show high exploration, over 80% explored or piloted, that sounds great. When companies actually try to transition to custom, complex enterprise-grade systems, their projects fail drastically. Only a tiny fraction, we estimate 5%, reach successful scalable production.
Okay, before we dive deeper into the P&L question itself, I think we really must address the foundation of these conflicting claims. That's an interesting point on the 95% failure rate. But we have to talk about how these studies were conducted, because that's where I think a significant fault line lies. The Wharton study, for instance, it's a large, repeated cross-sectional analysis. They survey around 800 large U.S. enterprise decision makers annually. It tracks real shifts in behavior in budgeting and demonstrated investment over time.
And that statistical rigor is important, I grant you, for tracking adoption trends, absolutely.
but we must be highly critical of the methodologies driving these conflicting headlines. That MIT report you mentioned, it is based on a multi-method design, yes, but its core survey of senior leaders, well, it's only 153 individuals. That's combined with interviews and public initiative analysis. That smaller sample size, and its focus specifically on implementation challenges, is, I would argue, inherently subject to self-selection bias. We might just be capturing the perspectives of leaders who are already struggling and are maybe more willing to talk about their zero return, potentially overstating that 95% failure rate for the market as a whole.
I agree. It is crucial to acknowledge that. The NANDA survey likely offers a deep qualitative window into why deployments fail, those organizational choke points that a broad sentiment survey like Wharton's might miss. However, the sheer volume of the Wharton data, that N of roughly 800 year-over-year, gives it statistical gravity regarding the flow of capital and user behavior. The surge in daily use and those hard budget increases, those are real allocated dollars, not just, wishful thinking from a few optimistic VPs.
Okay, but this brings us right back to the core debate, though, the nature of measurement.
Precisely.
The positive ROI you cite, the core of this accountable acceleration story, it seems focused almost exclusively on employee efficiency and productivity. I mean, that is the top benefit cited across the board, isn't it? But where's the bridge? If efficiency, just doing isolated tasks faster, doesn't actually translate into reduced structural costs or maybe increased throughput that generates new revenue, isn't it just busy work being done faster? We have to follow that efficiency gain all the way to the CFO's ledger. And look at the budget allocation. Sales and marketing functions capture, approximately 70% of GenAI budget allocation according to some analyses. This reflects, I think, a bias towards visible, maybe top-line metrics that are just easy to track, like, generating marketing copy or maybe optimizing customer service chats. Meanwhile, critical, potentially high ROI back-office functions, finance, procurement, operations, which often offer higher, clearer return through maybe eliminating BPO, business process outsourcing, they remain significantly underfunded. So if 7 out of 9 major sectors show little structural change according to our findings, how can we really assert that acceleration is systemic rather than just confined to a few sort of easy win functions?
Well, I'm not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning because I think it ignores the true impact of productivity on high-value human capital. While productivity is the top initial benefit, remember 72% of organizations are actively tracking profitability or losses specific to these investments, and 74% are seeing positive returns. This suggests they are connecting productivity to financial impact, maybe through capacity gains or incremental revenue generation. Furthermore, it's not just simple summarization anymore. The use cases are expanding into core business functions that directly impact service delivery in, yes, cost centers. IT is leveraging GenAI for code writing and debugging, HR for compliance document generation, legal for contract review and summarization. These are tangible, specialized wins that fold GenAI into mission-critical workflows.
It's maybe not about immediate headcount reduction right now. It's perhaps about reallocating highly skilled, high-cost professionals to more strategic, maybe revenue-generating tasks. That is, I would argue, a clear P&L decision, even if the structural change takes longer than, say, 6 months to manifest across the entire organization.
I agree that the expectation of instantaneous P&L transformation is unrealistic. Fair point. Your study captures the maturity of adoption, accountability, and user sentiment. Our report, conversely, captures the failure so far to achieve systemic P&L transformation across the enterprise population, at least within the initial investment cycles. High usage in areas like data analysis or summarization might make employees feel more productive, sure, but for 95% of firms, that game hasn't yet translated into the hard metric of reduced operating expense or increased margin. The question remains, why not?
Then let's pivot to that implementation barrier, the learning gap and implementation success. My position is that enterprises are proactively addressing internal constraints. The significant investment we see, that 30% of tech budgets now devoted to internal R&D, shows leadership is committed to building custom capabilities,
ones tailored to their specific data environment and governance requirements. Moreover, 89% of leaders agree GenAI enhances rather than replaces existing employee skills. This suggests training and capability building are really central to converting that mainstream use into durable, measurable ROI.
That's a compelling argument regarding commitment and future intent, yes, but the current data on execution, well, it tells a very different story. Have you considered that relying so heavily on internal R&D might actually be misplaced, or at least highly risky? Our analysis shows that internal builds fail twice as often. They achieve only about a 33% success rate compared to the 66% success rate seen when companies rely on strategic external partnerships. The core barrier isn't just budget or infrastructure, it seems to be the lack of learning capability inherent in many of these static, maybe off-the-shelf wrapper-type tools.
Wait, what do you mean exactly by static tools failing? If companies are investing that 30% in internal R&D, surely they are building custom models tuned to their data. Isn't that the very definition of adapting?
It is, but the iteration velocity might be too slow. A static tool is, well, it's excellent for a single defined task, summarizing a document, maybe, like you said. But complex business processes are multi-step. They involve collaboration, evolving context, feedback loops over weeks or even months. Users, we find, often abandon those bespoke enterprise tools because they don't retain context effectively, they don't learn from user feedback quickly enough, and they end up forcing professionals back to more flexible, though critically unsecured, consumer tools like basic ChatGPT. This phenomenon you cited, high mainstream usage, I suspect a lot of that is actually a shadow AI economy operating under the radar.
I believe the term shadow AI might mask the fact that employees are simply demonstrating clear demand, which the enterprise is now rapidly trying to meet through more formal tooling and governance structures. It's a sign of pull, not just failure.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that entirely. While demand is clearly high, I worry that this high self-reported usage of personal tools is actually masking a huge hidden security and compliance debt. I mean, if 90% of employees, as some surveys suggest, are running potentially sensitive proprietary company data through consumer tools outside the corporate firewall, well, any productivity gain we think we see could be immediately offset by massive, unquantified governance risk and potential data leakage. That risk alone could potentially justify the zero return finding, because the eventual cost of managing the aftermath could well outweigh the current productivity benefit. So the failure isn't just technical capacity, it's the inability of many currently implemented static tools to adapt to complex, evolving, mission-critical workflows, which then forces users to make these risky choices.
I come at it from a different way. The behavioral trends captured by the large sample size of the Wharton study are significant. And while yes, the C-suite exhibits more optimism, VP plus executives are far more bullish than mid-managers. That's true. The consistency of the data across 3 years regarding spending commitments is really difficult to dismiss. Those surging budgets, specifically the reported 130% increase in spending, those are real hard allocations, showing confidence in the technology's trajectory. Furthermore, we see that mid-sized firms, Tier 2 and Tier 3 enterprises, are actually reporting quicker ROI realization than the large, complex Tier 1 organizations. Their organizational agility might be allowing them to cross that P&L chasm faster.
That is a compelling counterpoint. Agility certainly matters, and the reality is that the largest enterprises, well, they have far more complexity and inertia to overcome. I agree that the large sample size of the Wharton study provides statistical power regarding adoption trends and the reality of capital flow. We can't deny that leaders are committed to spending, but those budgetary decisions simply increase the stakes for failure, don't they? Conversely, the MIT NANDA survey, despite its small sample, offers that deep qualitative insight into why the implementation projects often fail, the learning gap, the pilot to production chasm that the broad sentiment surveys tend to miss. By looking critically at both methodologies, we understand that one is measuring aspiration and budget, maybe, and the other is measuring the often painful execution reality on the ground.
It is, and I think both studies offer essential, though seemingly opposing, truths. The Wharton data confirms that GenAI is now integrated into core operational behaviors.
accelerating adoption and demonstrating clear productivity gains, and yes, positive ROI for the majority of enterprises that are tracking it carefully. The shift really does seem to be from exploration to accountable acceleration, with significant investment aimed at future capabilities and customized solutions.
And while usage is high, the MIT data strongly suggests that true scaled P&L transformation remains elusive for the vast majority, at least for now. The failure to cross this GenAI divide seems to be a function of flawed organizational approaches, perhaps over-indexing on high-risk internal builds of static systems, and using tools that lack the learning capability and deep workflow integration necessary for complex enterprise tasks. For the next wave of success, companies probably need to pivot towards truly learning-capable custom systems, perhaps treating deployment more as an outcomes-focused operational partnership rather than just buying another off-the-shelf wrapper.
Ultimately, I think it is essential for those analyzing these trends and for our listeners to look beyond the headlines, whether they scream revolutionary success or catastrophic failure, and critically assess the methodologies being used, the specific metrics being tracked, and the underlying nature of the value being measured in each case.
Indeed, both studies offer valuable, albeit conflicting, views on the complex reality of GenAI integration. The debate over whether the enterprise world is accelerating or divided, well, it simply depends on whether you are measuring the enthusiasm and budget commitment of the C-suite or the hard, audited financial outcome, perhaps 6 months or a year post-deployment. The rigorous challenge of both perspectives is likely the only way to arrive at a truly accurate understanding of this rapidly evolving landscape.